Ladies and gentlemen, there is something divine in the timing of your arrival on this earth. You were not born at random. You did not enter this world by accident. You were born in a specific year, at a specific moment, for a specific reason. The year of your birth carries within it a message from God, a whisper of his purpose for your life, and a reminder that he has been orchestrating your destiny long before you took your first. You were not born by accident. The very year of your birth holds a message from God, and understanding this truth can transform how you see your life. When God created the universe, he didn't just set the planets in motion and walk away. He orchestrated time with divine precision. Every second, every season, every year unfolds under his sovereign control. That includes the exact year you were born. Before your parents ever thought of you, before the world saw your face, heaven had already marked your time. Your birth year is not just a calendar detail, it is a divine appointment. God selected that moment in history to introduce you to the world because that time needed what you carry. It needed your voice, your personality, your strength, your insight, your calling. There is no randomness in your arrival. Think for a moment, out of all the centuries, all the generations, all the decades, why were you born in the year that you were? Why not earlier? Why not later? Because the year you were born in was spiritually aligned with your purpose. That year carried spiritual battles and breakthroughs, challenges and opportunities, and God knew that you were the answer to something unfolding during that time. He placed you in that moment because your very existence was part of the solution. Your birth year carries the fingerprint of your assignment. In the fabric of time, there are threads of destiny, and your thread was stitched in exactly when it needed to be. The Bible tells us in Jeremiah 1:5, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. That includes knowing your time, your environment, and your generation. God saw everything, the good and the evil, the progress and the pain, and still said, this is the moment my child must enter the world. Your birth year speaks of a season where your gifts could grow, where your spirit could be tested, where your calling could take shape. Even if you look back and think, but that was a hard year, that was a dark time, remember that light shines best in darkness. God often sends his strongest vessels into the most difficult times. That is not a punishment, it's a mission. When you truly understand this, it brings peace to your soul. You stop comparing yourself to people born in other eras. You stop wishing you had been born in a different place or time. You stop doubting your worth because you realize God made no mistake. He didn't overlook you. He timed your life with holy precision. That brings confidence. That brings clarity. It means that your generation is part of your purpose. The year of your birth is a spiritual seed, and your life is the fruit that must now grow and bear witness to God's plan. Even the pain you might associate with your beginning has a redemptive layer in God's hands. He can turn the sorrow of your arrival into the strength of your assignment. So honor the year of your birth. Look into what happened in that season, not just in the natural world, but in the spiritual realm. Ask God to show you what he was doing globally, prophetically, and personally when he sent you here. Because within that moment, God was saying something. He was declaring to the earth, I am sending someone who carries a piece of my purpose. That someone is you, and your birth year is your banner, not of pride, but of purpose. When you embrace it, you begin to walk in step with heaven's timing, confident that you are not behind, not ahead, but exactly where God intended you to be. The world you were born into was not random or irrelevant. It was the very soil where God planted you with purpose. The atmosphere, culture, and conditions of your birth year were specifically chosen by God to shape you, prepare you, and call forth the gifts He placed within you. Everything around you when you arrived, the voices you would hear, the society you would grow up in, the challenges that would face your generation were all part of the divine environment that would refine your assignment. When God sends someone into the world, He considers not only who they will be, but also where and when they must be. That means the spiritual temperature of your birth year was no accident. If you came into a time of crisis, it's because you were meant to be a carrier of peace. If you were born into a season of silence, perhaps your voice was meant to awaken something. If your generation is marked by confusion, maybe your clarity is its answer. God does not birth you into a generation to merely survive it. You were born to serve it. There's a divine rhythm to the time of your birth. And when you begin to pay attention to the world you were born into, you'll start recognizing how your calling fits the very needs of that time. Look around you. What burdens your heart about the world you see? What problems move your spirit? What injustice stirs your voice? Often those emotions are tied to your purpose, and that purpose was planted the moment you entered this specific moment in history. You were not only born into your generation, you were born for it. God didn't just send you here to be part of the crowd. He sent you here to be a difference maker, a truth bearer, a light in the darkness. Your generation needs what you have. It needs your prayers, your courage, your wisdom, your obedience. Sometimes we're tempted to complain about the state of the world we live in, how things are darker, colder, more broken, but God already knew that. And in response to that brokenness, He released. That means you're not the result of the problem. You are part of the solution. The very year you were born was a divine response to what the world needed. Heaven sent you as an answer, not an accident. Even the challenges your generation faces are not too much for the gifts God placed inside you. Don't underestimate the connection between your burden and your birth. If you feel a heavy pull toward a certain cause, a mission, a calling, follow that. It is often tied to the very reason you were placed in this specific timeline. God knew what the world would look like when you stepped onto the scene, and He knew what He had placed within you to meet the moment. Every generation has its own giants, but it also has its own Davids. Every era has its Goliaths, but it also has its chosen ones who rise up in power and purpose. You are not out of place. You are not too late or too early. You are right on time. And God appointed this generation as your mission field and assigned you with the tools, talents, and spiritual authority to make a difference. That doesn't mean it will always be easy, but it does mean you are equipped. The more you study the world you were born into, the more you'll understand why you were sent into it. You will begin to see how your story intersects with the needs of your time. And when you live with that kind of awareness, you no longer drift. You walk with direction because you recognize that the world you were born into is not a limitation, but the launching pad of your God-ordained destiny. God is intentional. That single truth changes everything. He does not move by impulse or make decisions based on chance. Every detail in creation reflects his wisdom, order, and foresight. In your life is no exception. The moment of your birth, the year in which you entered the world, was not an afterthought. It was a part of God's deliberate design. The timing of your life was written into his plan long before you were formed in the womb. You were not sent into this world without meaning, without placement, or without divine strategy. You were chosen for a precise moment in time because your purpose fits that time. When you grasp this, it brings an unshakable confidence that you are not wandering through life trying to figure things out. You are living out a plan that was crafted with intention by the Creator himself. This divine intentionality speaks not just to your birth year, but to the unfolding of your days. God is not surprised by your struggles, your setbacks, or even your questions. He accounted for all of it in his plan. When he chose your time, he already prepared your grace. He already determined your strength. He already aligned your path with divine appointments. The same God who placed the stars in the sky and gave each one a name is the one who placed you in this generation and gave you a name, a calling, and a voice. There is nothing accidental about that. His hand was on the clock, his mind on your mission, his heart on your life. In Acts 17:26, Scripture confirms that God not only created humanity, but determined the times set for them and the exact places where they should live. That means your birth year, with all its unique circumstances, is exactly where you were meant to begin. If you were born during a season of societal unrest, then your spirit was formed to carry peace in chaos. If your birth year was marked by uncertainty, then God entrusted you with clarity. You are not a victim of your time. You are a vessel for God's purpose within it. You were shaped to rise in the very atmosphere others try to escape. When God sends a person, he sends them to fulfill a purpose that exists only in their specific time. Imagine the consequences if Esther had not been born in her era, if Moses had lived in a different century, or if Jesus had come before the world was ready. Timing matters to God. And if he is that detailed about biblical heroes, how much more is he detailed about you, his beloved child? Your very heartbeat is proof that heaven still has purpose for your days. You were not just meant to exist. You were meant to impact, to transform, to carry something eternal in a temporal world. And even if life has made you doubt your value, even if the world has tried to define you by your failures or your past, remember this: your birth was not a mistake. God looked through time, saw a need, and sent you as his answer. You are a living testimony of his planning. You are a part of his redemptive timeline. And when he sent you, he equipped you with everything necessary to accomplish the task assigned to your generation. So walk with intention. Speak with purpose. Live with the awareness that every day you breathe is part of God's masterwork. Your life is not random. It is written. It is designed. It is a divine response to a moment in history that required what only you could bring. And that truth will anchor you, guide you, and remind you that you are exactly where God intended you to be. Your birth year is more than a historical timestamp. It's a spiritual marker that carries within it a divine echo, a prophetic significance that many overlook. When you were born, the world was in a specific state, not just politically or socially, but spiritually. God, in his infinite wisdom, not only knew the condition of the earth when you would arrive, but allowed it to shape and mold the context of your calling. There were spiritual shifts happening the year you came into existence. There were strongholds being broken, prophetic words being spoken, and movements being birthed. These were not isolated events. They were part of the spiritual climate God placed you into, not to be overwhelmed by, but to be equipped for. The year you were born was part of a divine strategy, and hidden within that year are clues to your purpose, your assignment, and your destiny. Too often we treat our birth year as a passive fact, something we share for record keeping or identity verification, but spiritually, it's a starting line. It's the moment when heaven released the word wrapped in flesh. God did not wait for a perfect world to send you. He sent you into the chaos, into the confusion, into the rising tensions, because you carry something of heaven that this world desperately needs. If you take the time to study your birth year, to look at what was happening in the body of Christ, in nations, in movements, you'll begin to see patterns, alignments, and spiritual waves that speak to your soul. You may find that the burdens you carry are connected to what began that year. You may find that your passions mirror the battles that were rising in the spirit realm when you entered this world. This is not mysticism, it's spiritual sensitivity. God often leaves signs for those who are willing to look deeper. The prophetic meaning of a year, the themes God was highlighting, the revivals or resistance that emerged. All of these can speak into your identity. You were not just born during a time, you were born into a spiritual climate, and your soul was calibrated to endure and influence it. You are a product of prophecy, not just biology. You are part of a generation that carries an assignment based on the spiritual momentum of the time you were born into. That's why understanding your birth year through spiritual eyes is so important. It humbles you and empowers you. It reminds you that you are not a mistake, that your life is not random. It helps you see that your calling isn't disconnected from history, but intricately woven into it. God doesn't send people without context. He sends you into the world when the conditions are right for your purpose to grow and be activated. Your birth year might have been a year of shaking politically, economically, or spiritually. But if it was a year of shaking, that means your life was sent as a stabilizer. If it was a year of spiritual drought, maybe you carry the rain. If it was a year of silence in the church, maybe your voice was born to break it. This is why you must ask God for revelation. Don't just remember the year you were born, discern it. Ask God, what were you saying when you sent me? Because when you understand the spiritual atmosphere of your birth year, you will begin to see yourself not just as someone who belongs in time, but someone who was born to transform it. You are not just in the world, you were sent into it, released by God in a year that was crying out for exactly what He placed inside you. Even the hardships, chaos, or brokenness associated with your birth year are not outside the knowledge or redemptive power of God. In fact, they may be central to the reason you were sent into the world at that very time. We often assume that if something is painful, it must be pointless. But in God's kingdom, the opposite is true. Pain often precedes purpose. God does not avoid dark seasons when sending His children into the world. On the contrary, he often chooses the most unlikely and unstable moments in history to introduce his most impactful voices. If your birth year was marked by tragedy, loss, economic collapse, war, disease, or spiritual drought, do not assume that these are signs of God's absence. They may very well be the evidence of God's decision to send you in response. From the beginning of time, God has worked through what the world considers weak, broken, or barren. When Moses was born, his people were under cruel oppression. When Esther was born, her nation was in captivity. When Jesus entered the world, it was a time of political domination and spiritual confusion. God did not wait for perfect conditions to send his answers. He sent them into the chaos. That is how he works. He brings beauty from ashes. He births light in darkness. And he raises up deliverers from desolate places. If your birth year looks like a year of disaster, know this: God does his finest work in broken soil. The cracks in that year are not a sign of God's absence, but the very place where his purpose for your life was planted. Sometimes people feel discouraged or even cursed because their birth year carries memories of family crisis, national disaster, or generational pain. But this is exactly where God reveals his glory. You were born with an assignment tailored to that very season. The pain you were born into did not define you, it equipped you. The suffering that marked your time was not your identity. It was the backdrop for your testimony. Your spirit is stronger than you realize, because it was shaped in resistance. You were not just placed into the storm, you were shaped by it. God trusted you to survive it, grow through it, and emerge with a voice of healing for others who experienced the same. Even if your beginning was marked by silence or rejection, God has a history of turning hidden lives into history makers. The world may not have noticed your arrival, but heaven did. Angels celebrated, heaven rejoiced, and God whispered into time, "This one is mine, sent for such a time as this." Your birth year may be the very thing the enemy used to try and break your identity, but it is also the very thing God will use to build your authority. The more broken the beginning, the more powerful the redemption. Your story will carry weight, not in spite of your year, but because of it. So stop resenting the time you came into the world. Stop wishing you had a different beginning. The year of your birth carries divine design, including its pain. You are proof that light shines in darkness and that God never wastes a single moment in history. He is the God who turns mourning into dancing, despair into purpose, and wounds into weapons. And when you walk in that truth, you no longer carry shame about your start. You carry glory, because the year that almost destroyed your beginning is the same year God used to reveal his power through your life. That is how heaven works. It rewrites stories and sends warriors born from the very ashes the world tried to forget. You are not walking through this life alone. Even though your path may feel personal and your struggles may seem isolated, you were not sent into this world without companions, without community, or without spiritual alignment. The people born around the same time as you, those within your generation, are not just random individuals filling the timeline of history. They are part of the spiritual network God has formed for a greater purpose. You are part of a generation with a shared calling, a united burden, and a collective mission. That mission may express itself differently in each life, but at its core it is rooted in the same divine timing. You were born into a community of purpose, individuals who, like you, were formed in the same fire, molded by the same pressures, and entrusted with similar spiritual responsibility. This shared assignment doesn't mean that everyone will understand you or walk with you, but it does mean that you are not an isolated spark in the dark. You are a flame among many, a generation set ablaze by divine intent. Just as Moses had Aaron, David had Jonathan, and Esther had Mordecai, God never sends his people into a mission field without giving them a tribe, a people, or a remnant who understand the weight of the time they live in. Your birth year connects you to those whose souls were tuned to the same spiritual frequency. Together, your voices create a sound heaven is waiting to hear. Together, your lives form a movement greater than any one person can carry. Your generation has been formed in fire, exposed to rapid change, tested by cultural pressures, and challenged by spiritual warfare, unique to this era. But it's in this very pressure that diamonds are formed. You and those born alongside you are not weak or forgotten. You are warriors, sharpened by adversity and awakened by purpose. The trials that seem to plague your generation are not proof of God's distance. They are evidence of the battle assigned to you. God sends his strongest when the world is most confused. And if you look closely, you will see that those around you walking through the same wilderness also carry light, strength, and prophetic insight. They are your allies in this divine journey. We live in a time where comparison and isolation are common. Social media makes it easy to feel like others are doing more, becoming more, or understanding more. But when you step back and recognize that you are part of something much larger than yourself, a generation chosen by God for this precise moment, your perspective begins to shift. Instead of competing with others, you begin to unite. Instead of shrinking in shame, you rise in purpose. You understand that the same God who sent you also sent others who share your burden, your fire, and your longing to see change. When your generation stands together, when voices rise in unity, when hearts beat for the same cause, when prayers are lifted for revival and restoration, then the earth begins to see the impact of a generation awakened to its assignment. You may be one person, but you are part of a much greater army. You were not sent to fight alone, to dream alone, or to believe alone. Heaven has strategically placed you among others who were born for the same reason, to be salt and light in this hour of history. Together you carry the sound of your time. Together you hold the keys to breakthrough. And together you fulfill the purpose written into your generation by the hand of God. You were not born by accident. Your life is not a random event in the timeline of history. You were sent, chosen, and appointed by God to be born in a specific year, into a specific world, for a specific reason. Every detail of your beginning, the time, the environment, the generation, the challenges, and even the pain carries divine significance. Your birth year is not just a number, it is a spiritual statement. It is God's declaration that the world needed you at that precise moment. You are not behind, you are not late, and you are not misplaced. You are right on time in God's time. You were sent into a world that reflects the very mission you were designed to fulfill. The chaos around you is not to break you. It's there to reveal the strength God placed within you. The pain surrounding your beginning is not the end of your story. It's the soil where your purpose was planted. You were born into a generation that carries a shared calling, a collective fire, and a divine urgency. Your voice matters. Your gifts matter. Your presence matters. And when you begin to walk in the awareness that your birth year carries God's message, You will stop surviving and start fulfilling. You will stop questioning why you were born and begin declaring why you were sent. So hold your head high. Honor the year you came into this world. Let go of the doubt, the shame, and the fear tied to your past. Instead, embrace the truth. Your life is a message from heaven, written in time, unfolding in purpose. And the world has not yet seen the fullness of what God intends to do through you. The time is now. The calling is yours. Step into it boldly, because you were born for such a time as this.